Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Flourish video. It's a weekly thing we do here to have conversations on authentic gospel living, flourishing in our discipleship. I'm so glad that you are able to join us, whether you're on your lunch hour or at home, or as I know Tim Bruce often is, he's on the road somewhere and he pulls over and watches for a bit when he can. So whatever your situation today, thank you for joining in. Let us know that you're here. I've already put a welcome out there on the chat. This is designed to be a virtual conversation weekly around authentic gospel living, some part of authentic gospel living, as we dig that up together. And so let me know if you're onboarding here today. We'd love to say hello to you. And I want to introduce a friend and partner, and also elder here at Fellowship. Jordan Dillon is joining us. Thank you, Jordan, for, I know you rearranged your schedule to be here, and we're glad that you did. We were joking earlier that he was the only elder I could get, so this is who we, but that is not true. This is quality stock right here. Jordan, you've been connected to the Fellowship community for a number of years, now you and your family, and tell us about how long you've been connected and what you love and what your dream is for Fellowship.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I'm excited to be here. So my family and I have been connected to Fellowship for about 5 years.
That's what I thought.
Officially. And but I've known you obviously much longer. Joe and I are also neighbors, and so
that's true.
So Joe and Steph and Carmen, my wife, and I, we've known each other for a while, which is great. So yeah, I'm excited to be here today, but also we love being a part of Fellowship. We really resonate with how Fellowship cares about the community and is involved in the south side of Fort Wayne. And my hope for Fellowship, really, especially right now, is I hope that we can really become one community of Jesus followers in really true and deep, meaningful ways that surpass lots of things that could divide us. So
yeah, well, I share that dream. And tell us about you've in this last year and a half or so, you've onboarded with the elder team. What's that experience been like for you?
Well, it's been really good, but 2020 is a tough year to join an elder team, I think, at many churches.
Yeah.
So no, it's been really good for me. I really appreciate all the guys on the team, but also I really appreciate the process and how we work together, how we listen, how we pray, and how we discern together. So I've been really impressed with that, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, you've been a great addition to the team. My goal is not necessarily to talk about the elder team per se, but we can. I actually had intended to continue on our conversation we've been having this month regarding growing our generosity, and we'll come back to that. But I'm going to push pause on that this week to have a particular conversation related to a prayer that I prayed last Sunday. And it's going to bridge into more of a conversation perhaps you and I can have both as elders about what our aim is to bridge some of the political divisiveness that is all around us and kind of marks what 2020 and I guess in some sense 2021 we're still dealing with. And so I want to talk about the prayer that I prayed on Sunday and give a little bit more context around that. Like many of you, I had kind of a strong reaction of sadness and emotion Wednesday, January 6th, when we saw events unfolding in D.C. And as a part of that feeling of disruption in my soul just kind of kept growing day by day. And I realized there's something else going on here. It's not just simply the emotional response that many of us had about sadness or anger or frustration about what we were seeing. What I was feeling was going much deeper. And in the meantime, there was a few fellowshippers that I know and love who reached out to me with some messages to make sure I wasn't being deceived. And some of what I was hearing was disturbing me because it just felt outrageous, frankly. And so that added to the disquiet in my soul. And so here's the deal. I got up about 4 a.m. on Sunday morning and was really very unsettled in my soul. And I was wrestling with God about how to address the events in DC with the body. And I didn't have a clear sort of direction because of all the duress I was under in my soul. And I felt like, well, maybe the Lord is saying I thought maybe what I can do is just offer a prayer. And so I offered a prayer during worship, and I've got to tell you that I missed the mark with what I prayed and how I prayed. I missed the mark because the way I prayed wasn't clear. It wasn't clear because of it being premature. It was too early to understand what all was going on in my soul to say anything publicly because of the disruption I was going into. And so I'm sad to say that both the lack of clarity in my prayer and preparation for that morning, I kind of forced it. It caused many to hear what I actually prayed as judgmental and political. And that makes me really sad because that's not my heart and that's not my intention. That's not the intention of the elders here at Fellowship, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. It's actually opposite my heart and my history at Fellowship. For those who took offense at something you heard me say, forgive my failure to wait until this disruption in my soul had cleared a little bit more so I could understand what it was. And I can tell you that since that time, I've been more clear about this tension I was feeling in my soul was really a deep conviction that the Spirit was putting on me. And I've gotten a little bit more clear about what that is, and the elders and I are having some discussions to discern together what word comes out of that and what part of that word is for the body. And so when that is ready and prepared, we'll certainly share it with you. But that's what was behind the prayer for me on Sunday, and I just wasn't at my best in terms of discerning and preparing what the Lord had put on my heart. Therefore, it wasn't clear, and therefore, some of you may have heard me say or sound in a way, say something or sound something that's not characteristic of me. So I hope you still have some grace left for me, and I know the elders and I have been talking about that moment because they've heard from some of you who said, like, what was the deal? Here's what I heard. Is this what we actually is what I heard, what we believe? And so we're going to work through all of that together. And so I just want to throw out a question that maybe we can chew on together that's relevant to all this before I get Jordan's take on it all. How do you think we at Fellowship best bridge the political diversity that we have together? It's one thing to bridge our ethnic diversity, which we all know and love. If you're at Fellowship, you're probably here because that's the kind of community you want to be a part of. And that's not easy to do, but I'm thinking these days it's even harder to figure out how to bridge where we might see things different politically, especially in the season where everything is so divisive. But Jordan, let me just toss that to you. You've been in conversations with me and the rest of the elders after Sunday. What's your perspective on that, and how do you think we've done as an elder team as we process that?
Yeah, so when I think about the elder team, a couple things really come to mind. One is that there's a certain slowness of the pace. We really, I think, are intentional to not rush into things, decisions, ideas, initiatives, whatever it may be. So I think sometimes the slow pace is good. It allows time for different thoughts or prayers to kind of arise, and then for us to discuss and discern them. And even when I think about how we discern together. I actually looked up the word discernment this week for myself, and it really means to separate and to break things down so you can pull out what is important and good and set aside that which is not helpful or good. And so that really, I think, kind of captures part of the pace that we work at as a team, but also the process that we work as a team, which is with discernment together as a group.
Yeah, there's a lot of component parts of that question. How do we bridge our political diversity together? I guess I'm kind of asking, what things are helpful towards that you see? What things are obviously unhelpful or we should stay away from? We're looking for just practical ways, because these filter into our relationships with our family or our friends or other people at Fellowship who we might come to see things and believe things differently than we do in terms of politics. And so we can apply them in our individual relationships as well as our corporate relationships. And Jordan, I did want to say and have you comment on the fact that later this afternoon, the elders, we together have come up with kind of a joint statement about the prayer that I offered last week, which will give a little bit more clarity and helpful process to this time that we're in. So that's going to hit the blog later this afternoon. But what did you think of our process together in that?
Yeah, I think it was really good. It's one of the things I love about the team is that there's not this overly sort of voting system where we just vote on things and then move on. But there is a diversity of opinion and experience on the team. But so this week, I just heard a lot of listening to one another, of trying to see different perspectives, but then also trying to say, all right, well, how do we find a way forward? And another thing I think that is really good about the team, the elder team here, that I think is helpful for all of us right now is I think that distance breeds more division. So the further away we get from people who disagree with us, the more divided we're going to become. And even though it's against our instinct, I think that actually becoming closer to one another is going to be one of the ways in love that we can overcome some of the divisions. But that's not a natural thing for us to want to do. But I do believe that that's one of the things that's needed and I think we do that with the elder team. I think we move towards one another, not away from one another.
I think that's an excellent motto to follow. It's that proximity piece. If we're isolated in our own echo chambers, it's actually not helpful. It's easier, but it's not as helpful. And even when we do have proximity, we've got to figure out how to engage the conversations in a way that is constructive, productive, civil, safe. And these are things we're not getting much in the way of modeling from the world or culture, nor should we, but we as a church and as leaders need to model that. And so wherever that didn't get modeled for some of the reasons I mentioned, we're going to address that and correct that and are. So look for that statement later this afternoon. I think it will be helpful to read through that. I feel good about our process as a team to arrive together at that statement. You mentioned this idea of being together. I think one of the big challenges is for us in bridging divides, whether political or something else, in 2020 has been dealing with the double dip of coronavirus isolating us. Yeah. We just don't have the same kind of FaceTime. And even when we do have FaceTime, I've dropped my mask. I was going to say, it's usually with a mask on, which is different still, but that's been a real challenge for us as a body. We just haven't been present with one another. Ironically, right at the time where things are really intense.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenging things, you're right, is it adds more distance between us, but I think that's why it takes even more intentionality to not rely on being near one another, to actually be involved in each other's lives as friends and fellow believers.
Yeah, the elders in this statement that will be posted do a great job of pointing together what we all aspire to and what we believe, which is essentially, as believers whose focus is on Christ, there is far more that unites us than divides us. And when we get distracted or take our eyes off Jesus, then it can feel like there's these barriers in the way to seeing one another and to being in step with one another. But in fact, there is so much more that unites us than divides us. You want to reflect on that just in your own journey and experience, either as an elder, as a disciple at Fellowship, like just biblically and theologically speaking, what sort of things do we need to come back to get us standing firm in those things?
Yeah, so as I've kind of thought about this and reflected on this in my own journey, I feel like one thing that really I go back to and that's really helped me have a kingdom, or try to have a kingdom-centered view of working through differences, is when I look at the enormous differences in the time of Paul and the early church. I mean, there's geographic barriers, there's ethnic and cultural and language barriers, there's even historical ones, right?
Yeah.
Like where different people think that their people group is moving. There's a ton of disagreement and even just difference, and yet somehow Paul creates this network of early churches that are unbelievably committed to the cause, but also unbelievably committed to one another. And so for me, that's an encouragement that I can say, man, I feel like some of our differences aren't quite as big, even though they feel big sometimes, but if they can do that by uniting in Jesus, that gives me hope for us now too.
What do you think their secret sauce was? Trick question.
Yeah,
I mean, we all know what it is,
right.
And yet they were subject to the same cultural forces in their day that are, ready to pull us apart in today.
Yeah, so I do think that part of their secret sauce is that they were heading on a certain trajectory in life as people groups, and then there was a turn towards Jesus together. And in our context, lots of times, at least the idea of Jesus in church is something we're born with, and oftentimes we take a turn away from others. And so I think that there is something about just our experience growing up in the faith and church and reading our Bibles that's a different starting point. And it's easy to forget that we still need to be turning towards Jesus together, even if our starting point seems more collective. So that's one thing I think about.
Well, I'm encouraged when I read the New Testament as I do, and a part of my reading plan this year, I spent a lot of time throughout the whole Bible, but in the New Testament, so many of the letters that Paul and others wrote are addressing divisions in the church, and so it's saying this is not something new. The church has always had to wrestle through with how to be unified in Christ and not divided despite whatever is going on, which for us right now, political divisiveness is something that we've got to navigate together. For them, it was, huge ethnic issues, are the non-Jewish believers as first rate as the Jewish believers, and how do we distinguish between the two? I do take some encouragement that, like, if we're wrestling with issues that would potentially divide us, this is par for the course for church, right?
Yeah, it seems so, yeah.
as much as you would think Jesus would have another plan for that, but that's part of how we grow and mature, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I think it is par for the course, but it's also something the church has always had to navigate, is cultural influences and political influences. And for me too, on the opposite side, something that has been helpful for me too is when I've seen what's been possible in the history of the church at certain points. In the post-Reformation period, for example, there was a time where entire villages of Christians were laying siege to other entire villages of Christians. And there's a few famous stories of even Christians throwing other Christians out of castle windows to their death because they disagreed about church things or Bible things or cultural things. And when I see that was possible then, it reminds me that it's possible now, not just big picture, but it's possible for me if I let my heart and my actions kind of drift down that selfish path. And so that's kind of a negative view, but it does remind me that it's happened, and I don't want to go back there, and I don't think that's what we're called to.
Well, I want to ask a little bit more about that, but pause to say that I had to refresh my comment page. I don't know if we're getting too many comments in, but forgive me if I'm not attending to them because I may be experiencing technical difficulty myself. But just on that note that you mentioned, Jordan, what's been helpful for you? You've got your own political outlook, and that sits, second place to your kingdom outlook, or they're mixed together.
Yeah.
And where you find that the way you're looking at things politically doesn't line up with others whose faith, you value, and their pursuit of Jesus that you value. What have you learned that's helpful? I've heard you say one thing you've learned is not to isolate yourself from relationships where you say, "Oh, I don't trust that person's politics, so I don't have any reason to interact with them." That I've heard you say that. That's not helpful, and I love that idea. What other things are you doing to navigate?
Yeah. So one of them, which takes some effort and some discipline, is I've tried to spend more time understanding people that I disagree with than convincing them that they should listen to me and to my thoughts. And what that does is then I have to start asking questions. And I had this with a friend of mine the other day. We had a private conversation, and I just said, "Man, I don't understand how you think about some of these things, and I don't think the same way. But tell me about how you think about it." And we were able to have a good conversation. We don't agree on everything still, but we had a good conversation. But for me, it's been disciplining myself to listen more and to ask more questions, to understand them instead of pushing my ideas towards them. I have to trust that God is at work in all of our lives, and I have to ask questions that make space for God to work.
Wow, that's really important, because I was listening to what you said. And in fact, that's what I've been experiencing as we as elders who have a variety of different viewpoints politically are working through this together. That's what I see happening is a lot of listening. And that's so important, because when, the standard conversation today is you listen to someone until they trigger you, until they say something that triggers you. And then you're not listening, you're only trying to respond. And usually, if it's a politically, if the conversation is political in nature, the response is trying to shut down or convince somebody of something. And I think that's so prevalent in our discourse these days. But what you're saying just strikes me as Jesus-like, to lean in and say, "Okay, tell me more about that." Helps you to learn more about their perspective that you might be misjudging. But if that's reciprocated, then it's like, oh, the relationship is more important than the topic at hand, right? You think that's...
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And to be honest, that's another important piece for me that I've changed the way I interact with people. Before I get into any argument with anybody about anything, I ask the question, is our personal relationship strong enough to withstand this disagreement? And I've flat out told people, in a joking but serious way, I don't argue with strangers. And it doesn't mean I don't care about you or I don't love you, but if I don't trust that our relationship is strong enough to withstand an intense disagreement, I believe it's better for me to just give some space and let us stay in our own path and trust that God is at work. But that's been a helpful key for me in actually asking that question about my relationship with people I disagree with.
That's really awesome. That's a takeaway that I think we can all think a little bit more about, and how do we flesh that out in our own lives. And it occurs to me as you're talking, Jordan, so much of this, and I know you see it clearly, it's about our spiritual formation as disciples. What you're talking about is the types of practices that we're onboarding in our lives that helps us flourish more like Jesus intends. And in this particular way, it's in that inward dimension, flourishing with others, particularly other believers, listening, and in a way that where we don't shut down, or we wait till we hear something that triggers us, and then we like shut down, and then we try to shut them down. that is just not faithful to the way of Jesus, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I just think of so many verses that, and even a lot in Proverbs that say, son, listen to wisdom, listen to my instruction. The way that God interacts with his people is often, no, listen to my wisdom, listen to my instruction, and we can't listen if we're just talking all the time, whether it's to God or to our neighbor.
Yeah, that's so right. Jordan reminded me as we got set for this conversation, some of the things we talking about. He's like, is this going to be a 4-hour conversation? Because clearly we could talk all day. So maybe I just throw this question kind of as we wrap up. I'll throw this at you, Jordan. What would you say to us as an elder who sees some of the leadership interworkings at Fellowship? What gives you confidence and hope about where Fellowship is heading and our ability together to navigate these crazy days we find ourselves in?
Yeah, those are really big questions. So I think, I guess one thing, I'll start with what gives me confidence, hope is, as we talked about, the church is the plan. There's no plan B. And so God has invested in the success and the flourishing of the church for the good of the world. And so the fact that I believe that God, the phrase I use is God bends things back towards the kingdom, is that when I make mistakes in my life, or when there's mistakes that I'm a part of, that I'm a leader of, I have to acknowledge that and admit that. But I also have to trust that God can and will use that for good and bend it back towards the kingdom, even if I've messed it up, which I do often. And so I take confidence that God can and does use all things for good, and bend it back towards his purposes, and that at the end of the day, I'm not the savior and the designer.
Yeah, biblically speaking, I've been spending some time in the story of Joseph, and
exactly.
What is it, Genesis 50:20, that what the enemy intended for good, or what went off the rails for bad, God actually is going to make that good. He's going to bring something good about it. He's going to bend it back. I love that concept. And so we can certainly mess things up, but we can't mess it up so bad that God can't bring us back to where he wants us, because we are his plan A for being salt and light to the world. No, I appreciate all of what you said, and that nugget right there is worth the price of admission. So thank you so much for taking some time to come and share. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule as well today. I hope this conversation was an encouragement to you. And I just remind you, here in the next couple hours, we'll get this statement posted online. If you're a subscriber, you'll probably find it in your inbox even as that happens. But we're going to move forward together through these days with good cheer and joy and all of what Jesus has for us. So we're going to learn how to do that together, and I look forward to spending some more time with you next week. We're probably going to likely, depending on events in the world, which seem to change daily, I plan to re-engage our conversation about generosity next week. So stay tuned for that. God bless you today. I hope it is a very good one. See you later.